everybody is staying safe and healthy in this very crazy time that we're all experiencing right now. Let's hope it ends sooner than later and with a minimum damage to our population. But I'd like to thank you for being. Yes.
Paul, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think I ruined your share screen setting, so you'd have to do that once again. It was me accidentally pushing the wrong button. I'm going to stop doing that. There we go.
You've always been known for pushing the wrong buttons, Peter.
I know. That's my problem.
Okay, well, let's get started. Just a little bit about myself so you'll understand the context of the information I'm going to share with you today. I run a research laboratory here in the United States at the University of Georgia, and we study expert coaches. We study coaches in all sports. Specifically, what we try to understand is what's the differentiator between the truly great coaches, the one who are consistently at the top of the sport world, what differentiates them from the average coaches, if you will. And we will explore any aspect of that, from communication to the way they think, decisions they make, and so forth. And as part of that research, one of the things we discovered a few years ago is that almost everybody who is a highly successful coach or leader had a mentor. And so we began to study that. In fact, when we looked at the American football professional coaches, the National Football League, we call it, we found that the most successful coaches in that league had between 3 and 5 mentors. If they had less than that, they tended not to be as successful. And in general, surprisingly, if they had more than 5, I guess they got confused because they weren't very successful either. So what we've discovered is mentoring is almost a critical part of becoming a great and a consistently winning coach. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've discovered and perhaps help you discover a mentor or get into a mentor relationship that might help you develop yourself as a coach or a leader. You know, it all started with the concept of mentoring actually started back in the ancient Greek time. Was first recorded in the book of the Odyssey by Homer, where he tells a story of the general Odysseus, who was called to the Trojan War. Now, this was at a time where in ancient Greece, the father was responsible for the education of their sons. Odysseus had a son, Telemachus, and he didn't know who would care for his son's education while he was gone to war. He didn't realize how long the war would last. So he asked a friend of his who was too old to serve in the army if he would be responsible for Telemachus's education. When Odysseus returned 4 years later, he was so impressed by not only the quality of the education that Telemachus received, but also the personal relationship and the influence that the friend's name was Mentor had on Telemachus in terms of his values, his behaviors, his ability to be a gentleman, his civil responsibilities. And so to this day, the name Mentor means that somebody who has been personally and professionally involved in the development of another. The actual definition that most of us use in mentoring, I like the one done by Dr. Gordon Bloom, a professor at McGill University in Montreal. And he said this: mentoring is a relationship between an experienced and a less experienced person. Now, we often think, let's just stop there for a minute. We often think it's an older person mentoring a younger person, and that really is not the case. It's somebody that has more experience in a role or a responsibility we would like to have. And we might be the less experienced person, so we look to this mentor to help provide the knowledge they've gained in their experiences. Now, I wanted to bring this up because sometimes that experienced person might actually be a younger person. In my research laboratory, for example, technology is changing all the time. And as I'll probably demonstrate on this webinar, my skill in technologies are very, very low. So I have somebody, one of my graduate students who's in his early 30s, who is, in my opinion, my mentor when it comes to technology. So anytime that I need to learn about technology, I'll go to Marcus, is his name, and I'll ask him to either teach me how to use this, or sometimes I'll ask him is there a technology I need to have. And so it's really helped me to become a better researcher, and on the other hand, as a teacher, a better instructor, because now I have technology tools. For example, he's the one that helped me learn how to do these webinars. All right, so an experienced and less experienced person. So I encourage all of you to think about trying to get a mentor, no matter what stage you are in your career as either a coach or a leader. All right, and the relationship is, to pick up the definition, where the former has a direct influence over the development. Now, this development implies that it's going to be a long-term relationship, and that's one of the things that differentiates mentoring from a coach. A coach is usually somebody who can help you with a skill over a season or maybe even partially through a career, but it's relatively short term. A mentor relationship, once it begins, can sometimes last a lifetime. All right, so it's development, and the person personally commits his or her time for your professional growth and your personal growth. So it's both the profession and the personal. The last sentence there is the pillars of the relationship are mutual trust and respect. All right, let's move on. So we know what a mentoring relationship is. All right, first question, and here's where we'd like to use the chat. What, in your opinion, makes a good mentor? What qualities or characteristics do they have that you believe would make them a good mentor for you? Would you please type that in so people can read them out? Are you good with that, Peter?
And feel free to use either Swedish or English. Any of those will do.
Yeah.
Peter, det är Liselott här. Jag brukar använda den där chatten, men jag har inte den lilla ikonen framme helt plötsligt här. Jag vet inte om det är fler som har samma problem.
Vad knepigt. Kan nog inte hjälpa dig med det, tror jag tyvärr. Men det är några i alla fall som skriver.
Jag tror man måste gå på chatten, Liselott. Så får man upp en liten bild på det hela, så följer man chatten bredvid.
Paul, some of the participants are struggling to find the chat function, but we're getting there, and a few people have written some stuff in. For example, honesty. Trust, willing to give, being a role model, actual knowledge in the field or the area, being without prestige, challenge me to think in new ways, time, as well as willingness, I guess, to share experiences. Somebody who challenges me, asks the right questions, allows me to grow beyond my mentor, being a good motivator, being available.
But these are some great responses, Peter.
Yeah, some good characteristics there. I wouldn't mind a mentor like that.
Yeah. Well, shall I share what the research has indicated makes a good mentor? And many of you have identified some of these characteristics, which is great.
Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, first of all, a good mentor is someone, and one of you mentioned this, is willing to communicate with you, and also equally important is willing to listen to you. Again, it's not a coach who's going to talk to you. It's a partner. It's a guide who needs to understand who you are on both a personal level and a professional level. They need to be an accomplished and successful person. And I'm going to come back to this a couple of times during this presentation because this is important. Now, what's successful? We often think in sport it's the person who's always winning, or in leadership, the person who always has the best role. But it needs to be success how you define success. So your mentor is someone you believe is successful. And here's what I mean by that. It may be somebody that strikes a good life-work balance. In other words, they are very successful at work, but on the other hand, they have time for their hobbies. They have personal time with family and friends. They have a good social life. They're able to exercise regularly. So however you define success professionally and personally is really how it needs to be done. Those of you that might be youth coaches, sometimes the best youth coaches aren't necessarily the ones that always win, as you well know. They're the ones that have the biggest difference in the lives of those that they coach on more of a personal level. They're great role models. They're great at character development. So again, the mentor has to be somebody who is accomplished, has the experience, but is also, in your mind, successful at coaching. It's a person that you want to be much like. And somebody also mentioned this. They need to be approachable and available, willing to talk to you, willing to meet with you. They need to be, and again, this was the first one that was mentioned, they need to be honest. You're right. They need to be honest with you, fair and objective, meaning you don't want somebody as a mentor who's just going to be there as a cheerleader for you, somebody that is just going to tell you that you're wonderful. You want somebody who's honest with you, is going to share with you the information you need to grow and develop. You need somebody who's knowledgeable and inquisitive, meaning that they have extensive information that they can share with you. A lot of it comes from their experience, but also somebody who's inquisitive. They're always reading, they're going to workshops, they're talking to other coaches or leaders, and so they're always learning. This is also important because the relationship shouldn't just be one way. In other words, it's not the mentor just mentoring you, but sometimes it's important that you as a protege give back to the mentor. Maybe here's an article that I've read, or here's a video that I've seen that you may enjoy as well. And a good mentor is always looking for information. They're looking to learn. They need to be compassionate and genuine as a person. I think that's relatively self-explanatory. You don't want to be in a long-term relationship with somebody who can't understand your feelings and have compassion for you, and on the other hand, be genuine as to who they are as well. And then finally, somebody mentioned this too, they need to be a good role model. They need to show you the kinds of behaviors. They need to embrace the kinds of values that you also share. Somebody who can kind of, if you will, be a model for you to follow in the future. I want to take this one more step. We did a research study and we looked at what roles that mentors play. They can play many different kinds of roles in their relationship with their proteges. And we wanted to know which ones were most valued by proteges. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because when you're looking for a role model, you may want to, or I'm sorry, a mentor, you may want to look for somebody that you believe can perform these roles for you. The first one, the most important, they said, was a friend. Now, this information came from a variety of coaches, mostly in volleyball and basketball, but we also had swim coaches, we had golf coaches, and we had tennis coaches involved in this research as well. And we found that being a friend, somebody that they felt would be there to support them, somebody that they could trust, somebody that they liked, somebody whose values they embraced as well. Next was, and somebody mentioned this already, an acceptor, somebody who makes me feel like, yeah, I can be a good coach or I can be a good leader. They accept me for who I am. They don't try to make me into somebody like themselves. We've already mentioned role model, and somebody also mentioned this, a challenger. Somebody is going to challenge me to reach beyond what I feel comfortable doing. somebody that's going to challenge me or put me in experiences that are going to help me grow, both personally and professionally. Help me grow as a coach. Help me grow as a leader. Now, I've got another question for you. We've looked at what makes a good mentor. In any relationship, it's critically important that both people are good at what they do. Both people need to bring a set of qualities into the relationship that will make the relationship good. So let me ask you this question. What do you think makes a good protege? Go ahead and answer that. Maybe, Peter, you can put the chat back up.
Yeah, it's all up there. And the protege is then, just to be clear, that's the one that's the person that is actually being mentored, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what makes a good protege? Feel free to use the chat forum again, or please use the chat forum. So somebody who is willing to learn, willing to listen, open, open to change, open to challenge one's own perceptions or beliefs or truths, willing to develop, but also dares to ask questions.
Oh, I like
somebody
that.
Somebody who can take critical feedback. Somebody who's curious. But at the same time shows humility and humbleness. A good protege is willing to change, willing to give feedback and show response. Somebody who has a goal or aims for something.
Wow, these are great answers, Peter.
We've got some good people in Sweden, you know. Yeah.
The next time we do a mentoring study, I'm coming to Sweden.
Yeah. We'll welcome you with open arms. Somebody who's ambitious, and this is a good one as well. Somebody who's willing to learn together with a coach or with a mentor.
Okay, let me share with you.
All good.
Yeah, it's all good. Very good. Let me share with you what we have found when we did polled other coaches to find out what they believed made a good protege. They need to be open to, and people have mentioned this, constructive feedback. You have to be willing to hear some things sometimes you don't want to hear. And then you also have to be open to trying new ideas, not just listening to them, but actually putting them into place. And maybe sometimes that's going to require you to fail a little bit or feel uncomfortable. So you have to be open to trying new ideas and strategies. We also found that a good protege has to be willing to do these things, and people have already mentioned it. Commit to achieving goals. There should not be a question mark there. I'm not sure why that's there, but yeah, you have to commit to not only having goals, but reaching them. You have to take responsibility for planning your professional development. A mentor, again, is not a coach, so they don't bring to the relationship the plan for your development. As a protege, you need to bring the plan. They can act as a guide and give you feedback on it, but ultimately the responsibility for the development is the protege's. And then finally, you need to be willing to discuss, or I shouldn't say finally. The third one is you need to be discuss issues objectively, respectfully, and confidentially. Sometimes these coaches and leaders will tell you things that they really don't want to make public. But because of the nature of your relationship, they trust you and you trust them. They can share with you some information that may ultimately be very valuable to you, but it needs to remain confidential. And then finally, you've got to be able to reflect and be willing to change. I remember when Peter and I used to coach the golfers, the Swedish golfers, one of the questions that we would often ask the athletes is, are you willing to change? Because in order to improve, it means you have to do something different. And almost all of the players, there were a few who were rather resistant to that, but most of them were very willing to change. And so that's how you know somebody's open to development. And then also on that same line is you have to reflect on the experiences. In other words, your mentor may say something or have you do something, and then you need to reflect on it in order to get the value out of it. So yeah, many of you identified those, which was great. So when you enter a relationship, not only do you have to consider the qualities of the mentor, but as a protege, you need to consider the qualities that you bring to the relationship. Because if it's not one that's going to benefit you, if you're not open to those things or willing to do those things, it probably is going to be a waste of time for you and for the mentor, and nobody wants that. So if that's the attitude that you have, you're open to the feedback, the ideas, the strategies, you're willing to achieve goals, plan your development, then a mentoring relationship is going to be exceedingly valuable to you. So we know what it takes to be a good mentor, what it takes to be a good protege. Now let's talk about how do you find a mentor? How do you seek a mentor? Many of you probably have had some in the past, and so you know how to do that. Some of you may be looking for mentors, or you're working with somebody who would like to have a mentor. Maybe one of your athletes at some point wants to be a coach, and they're seeking mentors. How do they go about doing that? So what we have found is to find mentors successfully, the first thing we suggest is to observe and listen to those whose approach and work you admire. In other words, identify coaches or leaders that you really like their style, if you will, and that you admire them not just for what they do, but also for the kind of people that they are. Once you identify them, the next step is ask them for some help, specifically on a specialized topic. It can feel like an imposition to ask somebody to, quote unquote, become my mentor. Again, it's a long-term commitment, and it's a serious commitment. So we suggest start small. For example, if I was watching Peter Mattson coaching and I knew potentially Peter might be my mentor, one of the things that I always admire about Peter's coaching was his relationship with players. And so I might ask him for some help on that and just say, hey, Peter, would you mind discussing with me how I can develop a better relationship with my athletes? And so he helps me on that, gives me some strategies. And then once that happens, maybe there's another task that Peter's good at. I always admired Peter's ability to plan and organize our training camps. So maybe he can help me with that. And then pretty soon I might say, Peter, would you be willing to mentor me as a coach? Then he's probably going to, now that he knows me personally, he's probably going to refuse to do that, but he might suggest somebody else that might help me. All right. The final stage would be that no one has all the answers. So don't be timid in identifying where you need help, and then ask for it. Ask for an introduction to a potential mentor if needed. So for example, if Peter was my mentor and I thought I might need some work with, let's say I'm going to be a national coach, and I might have to deal with media relationships. And Peter says he doesn't feel that strongly about media relationships, but he knows somebody that's really good at it. So this person might also become a mentor to me, and Peter might make an introduction for me. So again, no one has all the answers. What we have found is that most people have between 2, 3, 4 mentors, sometimes up to 5. Most people identify one person as their primary mentor, and then they have other mentors for specific topics. Again, there's no right answer to this, but there's a step or a procedure for finding a mentor. Excuse me. Peter asked me to speak specifically about mentoring for leaders in addition to coaches, and I wanted to share a story with you. I don't know if any of you recognize the person to the right in this picture. His name is Adam Silver. Adam is the current commissioner of the National Basketball Association here in the United States. I do some work with, it's called the NBA. I do some work with the NBA in their leadership development. And my program always follows Adam. We do this 4 times a year. So Adam speaks, it's supposed to be about 15 minutes, but it usually goes between 30 and 45 minutes. Adam speaks before I do, and this is a picture of one of our meetings. Now, Adam has been the commissioner for about 5 years. Prior to that, he was a vice president in the National Basketball Association. At that time, the current commissioner was a gentleman named David Stern. Well, they knew 2 years before David was going to retire that A, he was going to retire, and B, Adam would be his replacement. This was not made public. But one of the things that they did was that David offered to Adam to mentor him as the commissioner in the National Basketball Association. Now, I think many of you will agree that's a very unique position. There's challenges in that position. There's skills that are needed that you just can't get anywhere else. And so a mentor relationship in this particular case was vital. And think about, for example, your sport federations and the leadership there. Most of those federations are very unique, even amongst the different sports. And so when David agreed to mentor Adam, Adam asked me a couple of things about what they should do. So I said, well, what was first and most important is that David has experience in the role as the commissioner. So Adam needed to ask questions about the kinds of knowledge and information that David had acquired over his 30 years as the commissioner. Now, here's something that I thought was very important. The leadership style between Adam and David was very different. David was known as David the Dictator, and that was a title that he loved because he thought that was really his leadership style. He was a dictator. He felt that ultimately the responsibility of the NBA was on his shoulders. So he didn't mind micromanaging everybody and taking direct responsibility for things. Very, very much a, if you will, control freak. Adam, on the other hand, was very different. Adam believed the NBA needed to be an innovative organization if they were going to be successful in the future. And in order for them to be innovative, everybody had to have a say in what was going to take place. So Adam was much more democratic in his leadership style. Now, that doesn't mean that they still couldn't have a good mentoring relationship. Because here's what's really critical in this particular kind of relationship. It was an opportunity for David to show Adam the ropes. Now, I asked Peter this yesterday if he knew where the term show you, when somebody shows you the ropes. Some of you may know this, but it actually is a kind of an ancient term that came from when sailing ships were our major form of transport. If you were a new sailor hired onto a ship, every ship was a bit unique, but the ropes controlled the ship. And so when you became a new sailor, somebody had to show you the ropes. Where were the ropes kept? How were the ropes kept? And what was the purpose of the ropes? How did you use those ropes? And so that's where the term show you the ropes comes from. It's how to do the job. And that's what Adam was able to do, learn from David, was the ropes. Because there was going to be certain things that you do as a commissioner that only the commissioner does. All right, the final thing here was it needed to be based on mutual trust and respect. Again, going back to confidentiality, David was going to share with Adam some things that he would not share in public, things that needed to be done very quietly. One of the things that I'll give you an example is that the National Basketball Association, the Major League Baseball, and the National Football League are our largest professional sports here in the United States. Their corporate offices are all located within about 3 blocks of each other, less than a square meter, in the heart of New York City. Well, the commissioners have lunch on a regular basis. There's about 6 restaurants they can choose from, and they have back entrances. And so it's only the 3 commissioners that meet for lunch. And they also base that on mutual trust and respect. So that was something that Adam was able to learn about. And David actually brought him into a couple of those lunches, show you the ropes. But again, the conversations had to be confidential. So trust and respect was absolutely critical. So those of you that are thinking on taking a leadership role, think about trying to get the person who currently is in that role, even if their style is different, to kind of show you the ropes, take you on as a protege, and help you guide you through. All right, so we've discussed what it takes to be a good mentor, what it takes to be a good protege, how to find a good mentor. So let's put it all together. How do you know the relationship's going to be successful? In other words, how are you going to make mentoring success? Well, we've discovered a couple of things that might be helpful. One that I think is absolutely critical is a contract. And I actually do mean a contract, a written contract. I'm sure most of you will probably agree that relationships often have difficult times when people don't understand the expectations of the other person. In other words, if you're my mentor and I don't know what you expect from me as a protege, there's going to be problems. If you don't know what I expect from you as my mentor, there's going to be problems. So if we sign a contract where we agree on certain things that we will do, it actually helps clarify the relationship. One of the organizations that I work with is Delta Airlines. I help set up their pilot mentoring program. So any new pilot coming into Delta would have a mentor. And one of the things that we found to be successful was we had the mentee or the protege and the mentor sign contracts. And I'm sharing with you some of the key points from those contracts. So here's what a protege should do. If you were going to be my mentor, I'm your protege, I would do this. I'm going to say in writing, I will be committed and flexible. In other words, when there is something that I'm supposed to do, I will do that. If there is a scheduled time that we're going to meet and something comes up for you, I'll be flexible. I'm willing to change that. Right. I'll also bring the agenda. So when you and I have a conversation, I will have the topics that we want to discuss. Now, if there's something that you as my mentor want to discuss, you're more than welcome to say, Paul, I think we need to also discuss this topic. Very much. You can have a say in the agenda, but I'm the one that's going to actually do that. We find this is critical because when the protege does that, they're committed to actually doing what it is they say they're going to do. Think about this. Many of you I know have players that you get them involved in developing their own player development plan, whether it's a fitness plan or a skill plan. Well, when they become active in the planning of their agenda, if you will, they become very committed to it. And Peter, I'm thinking about, for example, Nicholas Fost would always have an annual plan, wouldn't he, for how he was going to develop, and he would discuss that with you. Yes. You there, Peter?
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Annika Sorenstam would do the same thing early in January. She would always call. Usually she was in Hawaii when she talked to you for some reason. But yeah, same thing. Here's my plan for development. And it really allowed you to kind of mentor them in some of the things that they needed to do. But it also showed you that they were very committed to this agenda, didn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So again, as a protege, you need to be willing to learn, and you got to make mentorship a two-way street. In other words, I'm your protege. I'm also going to try to help you if I can. I'll make recommendations for you or introductions or give you some perspectives on things that are working for me. Now, a mentor, what do they need to do? First of all, they need to be committed and available. Somebody already mentioned this. A good mentor is available. Absolutely. That's one of the things that destroys a mentoring relationship is the protege just can't have access to the mentor. So good intentions don't work. You actually have to make actions. All right, they serve as a guide. They don't direct the mentor. Many people will have that tendency. They'll want to tell you what to do as your mentor, but they should actually serve more as a guide. They should also be willing to be one of many. In other words, if you're my mentor and I need some mentoring from someone else, you're not going to be jealous. You're going to be supportive of that. Realize that it's my development and I might need to have many hands on that project. Sometimes you're going to need to recognize generational differences. There's often an age difference because of experience. Sometimes people just think differently. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. And then finally, as a mentor, you need to be supportive of me, not judgmental. Ultimately, the decision as to what I need to accomplish as a protege is my decision. It's my development, or in your particular case as a protege, your development. And so you need somebody that's going to support you, not constantly judge you because they want you to be much like them. Now, here's what both parties should agree to. First, a primary communication style. In other words, again, generational differences. Sometimes people like to text, sometimes people like to talk on the phone, sometimes people like to email, sometimes people like to meet face to face. And you can use all of those communication styles, but what's going to be the primary one? As a protege, if I want to contact you as my mentor, what's the best way to reach you? What's the best way to have a conversation with you? And also, as a mentor, you may want to reach out to me. How are you going to do that? Secondly, agree to a no-fault termination period. For example, after 3 months of working within the first 3 months, either you or I can decide to terminate the relationship and just simply declare no fault. And what this really means is sometimes relationships just don't work out. And it's nobody's fault. It didn't seem like it was really what I needed. And some of the worst things that can happen in a mentor relationship is, you know it's bad, I know it's bad, but we try to pretend that it's good, and it's not. So it's better just to end it and walk away, maintain your professional respect as you part ways. As I mentioned, I did I helped set up the pilot mentoring program at Delta Airlines. Here's 2 pilots. The reason I picked this picture is the person in the left seat, the captain, is the father of the person in the right seat, the first officer. And so you can see that mentoring was fairly effective in that particular case. So it's actually a father and a daughter that are both pilots for Delta Airlines. But one of the things that we discovered about problems with the mentoring program with the pilots is the pilots very seldom can get face-to-face. I mean, you look at the cockpit, that's where they work. And they very seldom have an opportunity to meet with their mentor or proteges. So they have to do it remotely in some ways. Well, what we found out was most of the senior pilots who were mentors and the junior pilots had different modes of communication. The senior pilots like to have a phone call or send an email. The junior pilots like to text or use FaceTime. And so there was always a problem in how they were going to communicate. So it's really important that you decide the mode of communication between the mentor and the protege, especially if the relationship is going to be at a distance for some time. Next, it's very important that you have a mentor who is successful at what they do. You do not want to be mentored by somebody that you just don't respect their definition of success in the field, because what has helped them to be successful, they will share with you their experiences, their skills, their knowledge. And so that's what you want to gain. Here's something else that's important about a mentor's success. The people who are more successful as coaches or leaders generally have a larger network. And so one of the things that a mentor relationship allows you to do is have access to your mentor's network. Who do they know? Who can they connect you with? So they can also be learning experiences from you. What kinds of things or experiences can they help you gain as a protege? So a mentor's success is very important that you consider that. And again, it doesn't mean that they have to be the winningest coach or the best known coach or leader in your sport. It needs to be somebody that you respect their level of accomplishment. Another key to success in the relationship is the protege takes responsibility. In this picture here, the person on the left is a very famous American football player named Herschel Walker. He went to my university, the University of Georgia. His coach and mentor to this day is the person on the right. His name is Vince Dooley. Vince is a good friend and was the football coach of Herschel Walker. And one of the things that makes this relationship really work is that Herschel takes responsibility for coming to Vince with particular questions and challenges. he has issues that he would like to discuss with Vince and get Vince's guidance. So it's the protege that takes responsibility for the success of the relationship. Somebody mentioned this earlier, and again, it's also critical, the mentor availability. If your mentor just doesn't have the time to spend with you, doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means it's a relationship that's not going to work. So get somebody that you know will be available to you. And then the final key to a successful relationship, mentoring relationship, is longevity. So when you enter a mentor relationship, think about it being not just the kind of person that you want, but the relationship is going to last for a while. And generally that means early in the relationship, you do things like get to know the person personally. This applies to both the protege and to the mentor. What kinds of things do they like? Do they have favorite teams, for example? Do they have hobbies outside of their work? Do they have family? Perhaps a spouse, children? So you get to know who they are as a person. It helps with the connection. And then in the next phase, you start actually working on some of the things that are critical to your success, the skills that you need, the experiences you have to require. And then at some point in the relationship, it's going to change. That person's role is no longer the role that they currently have when they became a mentor. So the nature of the relationship changes, and here's where the friendship kicks in. They'll always be a valuable resource to you. You can always go to them. And I showed you a picture of Herschel and Vince. Vince is no longer the coach, and Herschel's no longer a football player. He's retired as a player, but the relationship still exists. Herschel still looks to him as a mentor, but it's evolved more into a friendship than it is a coaching or a mentoring relationship. So think about the longevity of the relationship. And I'm going to guess those of you that have a mentor would say that it's been a long-term relationship in your life. By the way, one final point on that is oftentimes people who are mentors don't know that they're mentors. In other words, I might have somebody I consider a mentor, but we've never discussed it actually being a mentoring relationship. So sometimes it can be an informal relationship that is still a mentoring relationship. But oftentimes, if you're starting one, it's better to start one with a set of agreements and a plan of action. So, Peter, that's close to about what I have to offer. I'd like to see if there's any conversation that people would like to offer, questions they have, or responses to any of this information, or perhaps they'd like to share an experience they have or something they've learned about mentoring that we can all benefit from.
That is excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to open up for some questions, and everybody, let's use the chat function. So if you have a question, feel free to either post it in the chat function or just post your name, and I'll let you come in and ask the question. But I have a couple of questions, Paul. Can I take you back to the start of the presentation? Because obviously I know that a big part of your area of research has been about developing expertise and how to develop expertise. And I think you said to start with that one of the important parts of developing expertise is to have a mentor.
Yes.
Can you expand a little bit on that, why you think that is, and how sort of people that are either already experts or close to being experts learn the most, and how do they continue to develop?
Mm-hmm. Okay, one of the things that really helps somebody develop expertise through a mentor is the values that you embrace. And Peter, you know this from some of the players that we work with. If you look at the ones that have been highly successful, and let's look at the picture we're looking at right here. The player there is Nicholas Faust. They have an unbelievable work ethic. And I think all of the players that we worked with, Peter, we were fortunate enough, they all worked very hard. There was never a player that was looking to get out of practice early. In fact, we're watching Nicholas here. And Nicholas is on the left. The next person to his right is Peter. And then the person to Peter's right is Graham Crisp. Graham served as Nicholas' swing coach in the time that Peter was working with Nicholas. And this is at the World Championships at Kiowa Island in the United States, and the sun's going down. And I think Nicholas had played that day, or it was a practice round. And we were out on that driving range until the sun, actually, it was so dark we couldn't see the golf ball anymore. Actually, it was later than that because Nicholas claimed he could always see the golf ball. And there was another player on the range too, and he also had a very strong work ethic, didn't he, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah. Patrick Harrington. Now, here's where the mentor comes in. The mentor embraces the values that they serve as a role model. And you can't get that from a coach. More a mentoring relationship, because the nature of the personal relationship actually helps that. And then it's also a long-term relationship. A mentor is going to look at all aspects that are going to influence your performance as a coach or your performance as a leader. It's not just a singular set of skills that you need to develop, but it's a knowledge base you need to acquire. It's experiences you need to gain. And so they're going to be able to help marshal you through those things. And that's the 3 keys to developing your expertise: your skills, your knowledge, and your experiences. And a mentor is really one who can take you through that entire development. Again, not singularly as a coach would, but as a mentor, they're one of many. Does that answer the question, or you want me to go a little deep?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That kind of takes me to you spoke about leadership and mentoring for a leader as well, and you mentioned Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and his mentorship, or him, I guess, being the protege for the previous NBA commissioner, or being mentored by him. One thing that I think about when I hear that is that some people in organizations would think or work under the conception that when a new leader is to come in, we need to start fresh. Yeah. One of the reasons to why you bring in a new leader, or why you bring in a new chief executive or general secretary or head coach or whatever it might be, is that you want to start fresh. But on the other hand, obviously, you also very often need the knowledge from within the organization and the history of the organization. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree with everything that you said. And here's the key. A mentoring relationship is not about creating somebody in your image as a mentor. That's why I wanted to bring up Adam Silver's leadership style. His personality is very, very different than David Stern's. And in fact, it's taken several years to change the culture of the NBA from David's dictatorial style to Adam's more democratic style. So they really did start fresh, but the things that Adam was able to learn from David, if you will, the ropes, allowed him to see what challenges he was going to face. And that really was the critical part. David wasn't trying to teach Adam how to do the job. What he was doing was showing him the challenges that he was going to face. He was showing him the resources that were available. Rather than trying to recreate himself, he was helping to try to make Adam successful as Adam's own commissioner, own style. And Peter, I think one of the mistakes we make in coaching teams is that we fire the previous head coach and we all automatically want to make changes, and we throw out everything that was probably very good. We put this new person in, has very little understanding of what's required, very little understanding of the resources that are available, doesn't know what the challenges are going to be that he or she is going to face. And I think mentoring probably could have helped a little bit.
Good. We have a question from the audience. Petra, who's in golf. What are your thoughts of having a mentor-to-mentor relationship where you'll be learning from each other and have a contract between two people who can learn from each other in their different roles as leaders, but without working together on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's called peer mentoring, and I think it's a wonderful experience. Would both of these coaches be golf coaches?
I don't know, Petra? Not necessarily.
Good. And because I was going to, that's a great question. I was going to share a story. My best friend, Jack Bowerly, is a swim coach. In fact, he was our head coach for the Beijing Olympic Games. And Jack has a peer mentor who's a tennis coach, a highly regarded tennis coach. And so they talk quite often about the kinds of experiences that they have, and they mentor each other through some difficult challenges. Usually it's player relationships. Sometimes it's public relationships or working with the media. But they find that very, very helpful, because a coach to another coach, nobody understands the problems and the challenges that you face. Nobody has potentially the solutions to your problems and challenges than another coach. So I would think a peer-to-peer relationship mentoring would be wonderful.
Great. I think we've got time for one more question, and there's one more very good question here saying, does the difference between a coach and a mentor rely on who is responsible for the development plan? Should a coach try to become a mentor, or is there value in keeping the roles separated?
Yeah, great question. I think it's possible for a coach to become a mentor, but I think initially the coaching relationship in and of itself should be kept. And here's why. Oftentimes a coach, like for example, in this particular case, we're working with Nicholas here, Peter, is a coach could regulate the amount of time and practice that Nicholas puts in. If we didn't put the brakes on Nicholas sometimes, he would have overworked himself and it wouldn't have been helpful. So to allow Nicholas 100% control over his practice plan probably would not be a good idea. Also, his skill development. Sometimes players don't take an honest, objective look at the skills that they need to acquire or practice. That's where a coach can come in. A mentor would let the player take the direction on that. So I think initially a coach, the coaching role still needs to be respected and taken in. Now, after a few years, or maybe in a year or two, a mentoring relationship can begin to develop. But I wouldn't use that as my goal. Here's the final thing, is sometimes you coach players that you just don't like. But you coach them anyways professionally. They don't have the same values that you have. They don't use the same social behaviors that you have. There may be lots of reasons that you don't like them. But still, as a coach in a player relationship, it can be very effective. A mentoring relationship, that wouldn't work out.
Great, Paul. In Stockholm, we've just made 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And I guess where you are, it's now 11 a.m. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much for taking your time to spend it with us. And thank you for sharing of all your knowledge. Thank you to everybody who has been following this seminar or webinar, and thank you for contributing as well. And we'll come back to you shortly, Paul.
All right.
Thanks very much.
All right. If I could leave you with just one thought, it's a favorite quote of mine regarding mentoring. A mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. Now, if anybody would like to contact me for any reason, that's my name and that's my email address. Please feel free to do that. Peter's recording this and it will be available. But if you would like the notes, I'd be happy to share the notes with you as well.
That would be fantastic. We can certainly organize that, and I have all the emails addresses to people that participated, so we can send those around.
Oh, great. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks everybody.
Tusen tack.
Bye now.